My name is Dan, and I'm proud to say I'm in love with a midget. Okay, you might think that there's a more politically correct term that I should use, but Susan fought against those terms. She said, "I am what I am, and I don't like feeling like I need to be called some other name than what I've already been called." Well, she respected the choice of other midgets to not want to be called that, but she felt very strongly that a spade should be called a spade, and well, that was that. Well, when I met Susan, I'd been looking to meet that special somebody for a long time. I dated a lot, more than I ever thought I would. With online dating, it was easier than ever to meet people. Just meet them, though. Actually finding somebody I connected with was not so easy. I was an okay-looking guy. I was tall, skinny, I had a good head of hair that the girls always seemed to like. It was black and curly, and of the few girlfriends I had by the time I was 25, they'd all threatened to leave me if I cut my hair, so I kept it long. I'm a nerd, there's no denying that. I love gaming and painting these minifigures from a game called Warhammer. It's so funny, me and my Warhammer guys, we like to trade stories of girls' reactions when we first broached the topic of Warhammer. First off, there are the books, which I love. Next, there's the game itself, which I also love. But painting and designing armies, characters, weapons, and staging a big battle, that was the really good stuff. I would spend hours poring over my minifigures, deciding which one needed which weapon, deciding which colors to use, which armies would be ready for battle in the next tournament. Well, the problem for a lot of girls is that the guys who tend to play these games are a little socially awkward and nerdy, which means that all my friends were socially awkward and nerdy. The next level of conflict with the ladies that generally emerged more in long-term relationships was the cost of the game. First off, the books containing the lore itself was not cheap. Hardcovers are about $40 a pop, and the codex, which are the rules of the game and the different strengths of each army and all that stuff, it ran over $100. The minifigures themselves were around $30 for the smallest guys, which are about as big as a pinky. To buy the bigger guys, monsters, tanks, and artillery, you were looking at hundreds of dollars. Of the guys in the group who were married, each had a room in the house dedicated specifically to Warhammer, but they constantly talked about how they had hidden their purchases from their ladies. Many of them had their own bank accounts set up just for Warhammer because they knew their wives, if they were to find out how much they were spending, there would be big trouble. Well, when I met Susan, I was up front with her right off the bat. We'd met on an online dating site, and we'd been messaging each other back and forth for a couple of months before we ever saw each other for the first time. I mean, there were our profile pics, of course, but those are just small headshots. They really don't tell you much about a person. As we talked more and more and got closer and closer, we realized that we actually did need to meet in person. So we picked a date, and we decided on a time and a place. And leading up to the date, I wanted to be really honest. I told her all about Warhammer and how traditionally it causes problems in relationships. She seemed kind of confused as to why I'd feel the need to tell her, as if it was some big confession. So I explained that it's the nerdiness, the time, the money that most ladies have problems with. I was skeptical. Lots of girls acted cool at the beginning, like they were just fine with all of it and super mellow, but it was when you got in deep into a relationship that they'd start dropping the comments or being mean to the other nerds or talking about how expensive a hobby it was and that I probably needed to stop. Warhammer was a huge part of my life. I'd never had a lot of friends when I was younger, so finding a niche like this with other people in the same boat really changed my life. It gave me something to look forward to, helping me practice my social skills, and it made me feel like I finally really belonged to something. So, after I had given her my big confession, I asked her if there was anything she felt she needed to tell me. Well, the conversation it was taking place on the phone, and when I asked that, there was this big, long silence, and I thought, uh-oh, yeah. She said that, yeah, she did indeed have something major to tell me. She said she was going to tell me before we met anyway, but She wanted me to get to know her as a person first, before she told me the news. So I prepared myself for all manner of news she was about to pour upon me, but I definitely did not expect what came. She told me that she was pretty sure I was unlike any of the usual girls I dated, and I asked her what she meant by that. She cleared her throat, sucked in a deep breath, and then just let me have it. "Dan, I hope you can see that this doesn't define me, but I have to tell you that I'm a midget." Well, it took me a second to compute what I had just heard, but I made sure I wasn't silent for too long. I didn't know what exactly to say, but I had heard that silence enough to know that it did not feel good. So I told her that, yeah, she was right. I had never dated a midget before, or actually even talked to one before. She told me that I was like most guys. She said that she had tried midget dating sites before, and they were okay, but there weren't really a lot of midgets around, so that really limited the dating pool. Well, we laughed about how hard it was for both of us to meet somebody, for different reasons, of course, and I told her that, well, I'd always be 100% honest with her if she would be the same way with me. I was grateful that I had been told before we met for the first time. I can't imagine how my face would have looked had I discovered it when she waved me over in some crowded coffee shop. When I got off the phone, I just sat back and thought, would this be a deal-breaker for me? How much did that really matter anyway? Okay, so what? She was small, she's a midget, and I'm super tall. I'd dated plenty of normal girls in the past. Not a single one had stuck. I couldn't help but be impressed by how cool she seemed to be about the whole Warhammer thing. But then my skepticism kicked in, and I wondered if that coolness was just because she knew what she had to tell me was that much worse. I talked to my friends that night at the game, and, well, they just shrugged their shoulders. The general consensus was that they wouldn't choose to date a midget, but that they didn't think that they'd let somebody like that keep them from a good catch. So, 2 days later, that was date day. We had indeed arranged to meet in a crowded coffee shop. I was nervous. We had joked about how at least we wouldn't have to carry some rose or wear something bright so we could pick each other out of the crowd. She would stick out like a sore thumb. Well, so I walked into the coffee shop that we'd chosen, and I did a cursory glance around the room until my eyes locked on with hers. She was sitting at a table, and she stood up as I approached. She barely came up to my waist, but she was super pretty. She had curly, shoulder-length hair cut in a bob, big blue eyes. I admitted to her that I had never been so close to a midget before. She said, "So, what do you think? Is it what you thought?" "I think so," I said. I wasn't really sure what I'd been expecting, but I didn't think anything really surprised me, which I told her. She seemed relieved that I had not just taken a look at her and headed right back out the door. I didn't know it at the time, but that first date was the first of the rest of our lives. We were married a year later. The moment I knew she was the one is when she came to watch my first Warhammer game, and all my nerdy friends just fell in love with her like I did. They were perfectly comfortable with her. That's really rare. Almost as rare as her. Almost. To watch more animated story videos like this, hit that subscribe button and tell us in the comments section what you thought about this story.